And last time we discussed a very important topic about pure devotional service, how bhakti is a process, there is no cause, ahetuki, and also it is uninterrupted. This is the topic we discussed. And then in the following verse, Shuta Goswami says that if one renders such kind of devotional service, knowledge and detachment is a natural concomitant byproduct. One will automatically develop renunciation. So having discussed so far the importance of pure devotional service, a question will appear in the minds of any sincere student of Bhagavatam about the standards of how we can balance the standards of pure devotional service with our day-to-day responsibilities in life. We all have responsibilities in the Varnashrama. Many of us are having responsibilities of home, business, job. We are suited members. We are part of the Varnashram which Krishna has made. So how do we live a life and how do we understand what is Bhagavatam's perspective on our life? So that will be the discussion from text number 8 till text number 15, which we will now take up. So we'll start with verse number 8. One of you can read the translations after which I end the verse. So text number 8, please respond. Dharma swanushtita pumsam vishwaksena kathasuya notpadayet yadi ratim shama evahi kevalam.
The occupational activities a man performs according to his own positions are only so much useless labor if they do not provoke attractions for the message of the personality of Godhead.
So here it's a very important verse because we all have our responsibilities, we all have our dharma, our duties to perform. So in the previous verses, it has been established how we should only take complete shelter of Krishna. So now you may say, but I am a dharma. I am a human being. Pumsam, dharma, sanushtita pumsam. We all have our duties. So what should we do? So Sutta Goswami says, dharma sanushtita pumsam vishwaksenu kathasuyaha. Vishwaksenu means Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Kathasuyaha, whatever occupational duties we have, we should be able to sit and hear about Krishna, like what you are doing right now. Notpadayet yadi ratim na utpadayet. Agar hriday mein utpann nahi hua, na utpadayet yadi, there is no rising of ratim. Ratim means attraction. If attraction to hearing the Lord does not arise by your so-called duties in life, then all your dharma and all your duties are shama evahi kevalam. Keval means it's only shama, it's only useless labor. So in very strong words, Sutta Goswami is saying our duties, our responsibilities are important, but ultimately it should be designed in such a way that we should be able to spend time to hear about the Lord. This is the main message of this verse. Earlier, there was an emphatic declaration that we need to perform pure devotional service, which is uninterrupted, which is without an agenda, any ulterior motive, just pure service to Krishna. And if somebody has too many responsibilities in life, then Sutta Goswami's proposal is, fine, do what you need to do, but it will all be useless labor if your work doesn't bring you to a situation where you can come together and hear about Krishna. Simple. So in practical terms, what it means is you could have your schedule, you could have your lifestyle in such a way that you can spend some time regularly studying the scriptures or hearing and reading about the Lord. Is it difficult? I mean, I know people who spend a lot of time watching, web series on OTT platform. There is so much time for cricket matches. There is so much time for movies. So fine. I mean, we're not saying against that thing. Suta Goswami is simply saying regulate your life in such a way that you can also hear about Krishna. Simple. And if we don't do that, if there is no attraction for the Lord developing by our activities, then our activities is simply useless labor. Why such strong words are being used? Because any activity we perform gives us a reaction. There is something called as law of karma. Every action leads to an equal and opposite reaction. So all our activities that are not connected to the Lord will give us good results, bad results, or whatever results, but those results, to enjoy or suffer those results, we have to take birth in this material world. So it is in that sense useless labor. However, when we connect to the Lord, all our actions will help in liberating us from the cycle of birth and death. So in this context, Suta Goswami says, please organize your life in such a way that you can spend some time hearing about the Lord, discussing about the Lord. If you look at the kind of lectures that are available on YouTube by ISKCON devotees, if you go to the website audio.iscondesire3.com, you will find thousands and thousands of lectures. And in fact, just the lectures in our temple, since 2004 or 5, they have uploaded all the lectures. You can spend your whole life hearing 1 or 2 lectures every day and still you will never finish the stock. There is so much Krishna Katha. So I understand, Suta Goswami also understands that it will not be possible for us to spend our whole day doing devotional service, but at least we can center our life on hearing and chanting. This is the mood, or this is the culture that was prevalent in the Vedic society. Now, many places in India till 30, 40 years ago were centered on a temple in the village or the town, and the whole lifestyle of the village, the town surrounded that temple, where people would gather in the evenings for Krishna Katha. They would gather around for devotional dramas after a long day's labor, and they would come together and they would do Krishna Katha. And they were all part of normal family life. None of them were brahmacharis or sannyasis. They were people like you and me. They were ordinary people. I grew up in a small village, so I can say this with a lot of conviction because my grandfather was a priest in a temple. And I grew up, I spent my first 10 years in a small town where the temple was the center of our lives. So every evening we would walk 10 minutes from the fields to the temple where all the villagers would gather and there would be some katha or some drama. And that's where I learned all the Mahabharata and Ramayana in my childhood by just seeing dramas. And after the dramas and a small satsang, people would go back to their respective homes. Now, when I go to my hometown, I don't see anybody in the temple. Those rituals are going on. Those daily rituals are going on in the evenings, but hardly anybody comes because people are busy watching IPL and Bollywood on the television. I grew up in the mid-1970s and late 1970s, so there was no television that time in our hometown. So village life was centered on hearing about Krishna. And if you see in the Chaitanya Charitamrita and our scriptures, this kind of lifestyle is mentioned to be existing in India even some few hundred years ago. When Madhavendra Puri appeared 500 years ago, this was the life that was happening in Bengal, in Orissa. In fact, in 2006, we went for a yatra to Jagannath Puri through the villages of Orissa. And in one particular village in Remuna, we did Harinam Sankirtan and the entire village came to greet us. And, it was like a festive occasion for them. All the simple, poor people, they have hardly any facilities, cow dung thatched houses. They would come out of their house and they would blow their conch shells to welcome people who have come from Mumbai, and we are doing Harinam Sankirtan, all young boys, 200 of us. And these villages were greeting us by blowing conch shells, and each house had tulsi plant outside their house. They would offer respects to us. And then we went to a school where by previous arrangement, we had organized it in such a way that the school principal was there at the school gate to welcome us with 200 garlands for each of the IYS boys. And they had Nimbu Sharbat for all of us. And then a Harinam procession went to one person's house who was the host. And he had Radha Govind deities in his house for the last 400 years. His family ancestors have been worshipping. So this man, he organized a big feast for 250 boys from Mumbai. And it was an Ekadashi, and he had arranged a 10-course huge feast in that village in the evening with no proper facilities. And he himself was standing with a lantern in the night to help us wash our hands and go out. He did so much service. And in the end, when we were leaving, I remember I was part of the management team. We handed him a nice donation. With tears in his eyes, he refused to accept it, saying that it is a great honor to welcome devotees of Krishna in our village. I mean, I was thinking, when we were doing Harinam there, everybody was welcoming us with open arms in that village, and they have nothing to protect, they have nothing to cherish. Orissa at that time, Orissa villages were very poor during those days. In Mumbai, when we do Harinam Sankirtan, I have seen that the security guards are standing with suspicious look in their eyes, and there are a lot of security protocols and beware of dogs, and people are worried. Who are you? There is so much fear and insecurity when you have something worthwhile, when you have some material opulence. But in villages, people welcome you with open arms. This was the culture where it was not what Suta Goswami is saying in this last line, Shrama Evai Kevalam, useless endeavor. When we don't have a life centered on Krishna Katha, then we simply try to save what we have. Ahara Nidra Bhaya Maitunam Bhaya. The fear principle governs our lives. We try to defend whatever little we have. This is what is called as we live with what is called as a scarcity mindset. We are always insecure about losing whatever little we have. But when we open our hearts to welcome Krishna and hear about Krishna, then we develop what is called an abundance mentality. We begin to see that this world has enough for everyone. We begin to open our hearts. I remember growing up in a small village with my grandparents, and I remember even just recently, many Indian villages didn't have much money. Individually, they didn't possess much, but collectively, because temple life was the center, they were contented and they were satisfied. Srila Prabhupada also says that when he was a young child, his father would get up every day in the morning at 6:30 or 7. And he would go for shopping and would buy flowers and some puja paraphernalia. And from 9 o'clock, he would start his worship in the morning. Until 1 o'clock in the afternoon, he would do his puja of his family deities. And at 1, he would take lunch and take a little rest and then go to his shop. He had a cloth business. And he would come back at night at 10 o'clock and again do puja. So Prabhupada says, my father's main business was puja. And just to maintain the family, he did some little business. So the life centered on hearing, chanting Krishna's name, worshipping Krishna. Now, we may not be able to emulate that standard, but at least we can understand the principle. The principle of hearing and discussing Krishna Katha is what spiritual life is all about. Suta Goswami is saying that if we don't develop attraction for hearing about Krishna, then we may be engaged in a lot of duties, but all those duties are useless labor. Having discussed this, you may say, but then how am I supposed to earn money? How am I supposed to, I work hard so that I can have money. I have money so that I can enjoy. So how do we live our life with the income that we earn? That is revealed in the next verse, which is text number 9. So you can please repeat after me. Text number 9 from the second chapter. Dharmasya yapavargasya nartortayopakalpate nartasya dharmekantasya kamolabhaya hismrita.
All occupational engagements are certainly meant for ultimate liberation. They should never be performed for material gain. Furthermore, according to sages, one who is engaged in the ultimate occupational service should never use material gain to cultivate sense gratification.
So here, Sutta Goswami is saying that you have your duties to perform. Please perform them, but in a mood for apavargasya dharmas. The first line says, dharmasya apavargasya. Apavargasya means our religious duty should be performed for getting liberation. See, in Sanskrit grammar, pavargasya means, we have, I don't know if you studied this in grammar, we have the vargas we study. Ka, ka, ga, ga, na. Cha, cha, ja, ja, na. Ta, ta, da, da, na. Have you read this? When you were a child, pa, pa, ba, ba, ma. Then ya, ra, la, va, sha, sa, ha, ksha, ta, gya. After a, e, u, then we learn this. So the fourth line is pa, pa, ba, ba, ma. This is called as pa varga, which is consisting of all the pa letters. Pa, 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 ba, ma. Now, apavargasya means the opposite of pa varga. Pa varga is pa, pa, ba, ba, ma. Opposite means opposite of pa, pa, ba, ba, ma. So this is what this means is the pa varga means each letter of this varga represents something. Like pa stands for parishram. Material life means pa varga. Spiritual life means apavarga, opposite of pa varga. Material life means pa varga. Pa stands for parishram. Pa stands for phema. Phema means foam. When a person works very hard, when he does a lot of parishram, then he starts foaming from his mouth. So material life is characterized by pa, pa, ba, ba, ma, which means pa stands for parishram or intense hard work. And because of intense hard work, we start foaming in the mouth, which is phema. Pa, ba. Ba means vyartha. Vyartha means most of our labor is useless. Many times we work and we waste money and we do useless endeavor. Then pa, ba, then ba. Ba means bhaya. Material activities lead to fear, insecurity. And finally, there is ma. Ma stands for mrityu or death. So, material life leads to pavarga, which means parishram, phema, vyartha, bhaya, and mrityu. So, spiritual life means apavargasya, which means opposite of this, which means that which is not useless endeavor, that which will give us liberation but not death, that which will not be useless, that which will not give us fear but fearlessness. Therefore, the very poetically, it is liberation or spiritual path is also known as apavargasya. So Sutta Goswami is saying in this verse that if you want to perform your duties and dharma, please perform them for apavargasya or for liberation. Dharmasya apavargasya and narthorthayopakalpate. Don't perform them for money. See, money should not be the goal. Money should be the means. If money becomes the end, then it will lead to distress. But if money is a means to achieve something else, then it makes sense. Nartasya dharma kantasya kamulabhaya ismrita. And then, by performing your duties, if you earn money, please don't use that money for simply sense gratification. Sense gratification uncontrolled leads to misery. In the Bhagavad Gita, 16th chapter, Krishna speaks about positive energy and negative energy. He speaks about Asura Sampatti and Deva Sampatti. He speaks about demoniac qualities in our heart and divine qualities in our heart. He says, however bad we are, however negativity we are engulfed in, if we perform activities according to our varna and ashram, according to our dharma, there are certain activities which will lead or inculcate divine qualities in us. If we simply do that, then we will be peaceful. So now for every varna, for every order, there are one divine quality which we can take shelter of. For a sannyasi, the divine quality mentioned is fearlessness. A sannyasi is always supposed to be fearless and just dependent on Krishna. He is not supposed to have any other obligation or any other position. For a brahmachari, his Daiva Sampatti or his divine quality that he needs to cultivate is Swadhyaya, which means study of scriptures. If a celibate monk who is staying in a monastery, if he simply takes shelter of study, deep study of scriptures, then eventually he will develop divine qualities in his heart, which will give him the strength to stay peaceful and happy and contribute to the society. For a Vanaprastha, for one who is retired, one who is like 55, 60 years old, and he's spent his whole life earning money, taking care of his family, now in his retirement age, his main quality that he needs to cultivate is tapasya. He needs to perform some austerities. He needs to stop going for parties and functions and social gatherings and instead focus more now on devotional pursuits because he is now entering an advanced age. So tapasya is his work that he needs to do. Sannyasi has to be fearless. A brahmachari has to do swadhyaya. And a grahastha, which is like all of you here in the audience, for a grahastha, the divine quality mentioned is charity, contributing for a noble cause. And that will neutralize the desire for sense gratification, which is a threat mentioned in today's verse. That nartasya dharma kantasya kamo labhaya ismrita. Don't spend the money only on sense gratification, but rather you spend your life in such a way that you can give charity and you can, instead of sense gratification, you can spend that time in hearing about the Lord. This is what is recommended in this verse. And even if we engage in sense gratification, like even if we get money, even if we have desires, we need to control them and transcend them and lead a life centered on asking about the Lord more and more. And this is a recommendation of Suta Goswami in the next verse, which is text number 10. So we can chant text number 10 now. Please repeat after me. Kamasya nendriya priti labho jiveta yavata jivasya tattva jigyasa narto yascheha karmabhi.
Life's desires should never be directed towards sense gratification. One should desire only a healthy life or self-preservation, since a human being is meant for inquiry about the absolute truth. Nothing else should be the goal of one's works.
So now we have many desires. All of us, it said that you may take a paper which is as big as the sky, and you may take a pen which has ink as much as the waters in all the oceans. And with that paper and that pen and that ink, if you write all your desires on that paper, you'll never be able to finish writing up all your desires. There are so many desires we have in our heart. So Bhagavatam says that kamasya nendriya priti, instead of fulfilling all our desires through sense gratification, labho jiveta yavata, let us start understanding about the goal of life, because this is a prerogative of human beings. Animals cannot understand that. Animals cannot think beyond eating, sleeping, sex life, and defending. If you see, animals are generally revolving only on these four activities. And when human beings also do only these four things, of course, they do it through sophisticated way, then we are nothing but well-dressed, polished, sophisticated, two-legged animals, according to scriptures. We can and we need to think beyond. We need to ask the question, why? Why do we grow old? Why is there death? What happens after life? Who am I? Where has this universe come from? Everything is getting destroyed. Is there something which stands the test of time? Is there something which is true? Is there something called as absolute truth? In this world of relativity where everything is temporary and filled with duality, is there something eternal? Is there something that stands the test of time? These are questions which an intelligent human being can ask, an animal cannot ask. And when we don't ask these questions, then our questions are revolved only on these four activities, then we become more miserable than animals. It is just like, Srila Prabhupada gives an example that if a very intelligent young man who is capable of doing a lot of things, if he works as a simple peon in a government office or as a simple clerk, he is highly untapped his potential. And because of that, he'll be frustrated. Similarly, we as human beings, we have the potential to inquire about deeper questions and seek answers for those questions. And when we don't tap that potential, we are like a man who's capable of getting much, much more done in life, but is not tapping his potential. So we will be frustrated if we restrict our activities only to eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Unless we tap this aspect of our personality, we will always feel a vacuum. Only when we seek something higher than ourselves, only then we will experience fulfillment. Because only we can do that. We have the potential to think beyond ourselves. Animals cannot think beyond themselves. And when we do that, we open doors of liberation. We learn to transcend this world. We learn to transcend dualities imposed by this world. So this is the verdict of Srimad Bhagavatam. Somebody may say, well, if this is what I am supposed to do, if this is how I am supposed to understand the truth, what exactly is the truth? How can I know what is the truth? That is revealed in the next shloka of Srimad Bhagavatam, which is text number 11. So I request all of you to chant this after me. Vadanti tat tattva vidas tattvam yajnanam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti shabdyate.
Learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagavan.
So now Suta Goswami is saying, if you are interested to give up sense gratification and focus more on absolute truth, I will tell you what is absolute truth. I will introduce you to this concept of reality beyond you. Please know that this reality is called as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. So he is giving us a teaser, he is giving us a sample. Because once you are interested in spiritual life, one of the first questions people have is, well, everything gets destroyed. Is there something that doesn't get destroyed by time? Is there something that withstands old age, cyclones? So he's introducing us by saying there is indeed something called as absolute truth. It is called by three names: Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. What does this mean? Brahman, it sounds a very exotic term, Brahman or Paramatma, Bhagavan. This is a very easy to understand concept. Now imagine you are I don't know if you've gone to Ban Ganga. There is a constant supply of water coming from down for centuries, for millennia. And I saw once a photograph of Ban Ganga clicked in 1840s. And I took that photograph on my mobile phone, my smartphone, and I went to Ban Ganga and I was sitting there and looking at that photograph and looking at Ban Ganga. And at one point of time, I felt I'm timeless because I was in that very spot which has seen hundreds of years and which has been there for a long time. When you sit under a banyan tree which is 500 years old, if you stay still and if you are present, somewhere you will realize that the tree is kind of timeless. The tree has been there for 500 years. And at one point of time, you will feel attracted and you will feel a sense of peace because you will know deep within that you are also timeless, like that tree. You also don't die. So there is something within you which doesn't die. There is something within you which is eternal. So that endless, that deathless, that eternal part of you connects with that eternal aspect of that banyan tree. And therefore, you feel very peaceful and you feel comfortable. You feel a sense of belongingness with that banyan tree. Otherwise, how do you explain? People have this fascination for going to natural scenic places for trekking. I know people who go to mountains, they do mountain climbing. Why people love to be in nature? Why people love to go to the beach early in the morning? Why people love to sit on the ocean side? Why do people find a certain sense of calmness and serenity when they are with nature? Have you ever wondered? What is it about nature, forests, mountains, oceans that makes people feel peaceful? Because ocean appears timeless. A forest appear to be there for a long, long time. Mountains seem to have always been there. So when we enter that space, we connect with that space because we are also inherently deathless. We also, the soul also never dies. So somewhere that deathless aspect of me connects with the eternal forest, the eternity within that nature. That's why people love nature. And that connection, when it happens, it is called as the Brahman connection. Connection to the eternity, which is formless. We are not able to see it in concrete, specific terms, but it is an abstract concept, but we are able to connect to it. That is called as Brahman. When we enter a more meditative space and then realize that formless aspect of the eternal truth within our own hearts, then that is called as Paramatma. And then when we do further meditation and connect with a personality who is filled with all six opulences, then that aspect of absolute truth is called as Bhagavan. So that's how Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan is understood. Now, absolute truth can be understood in these three aspects with an analogy or a metaphor of gulab jamun. For example, if somebody has never seen a gulab jamun, somebody who has never tasted a gulab jamun, which is a very soft, delicious Indian sweet, right? Indian sweet ball. Now, it is best enjoyed, relished when it is served hot. And it is soft. It is little darkish brown. It's very succulent and tasty. Now, if somebody has never seen a gulab jamun, never tasted a gulab jamun, but has only heard about it, so he comes to your house and you are cooking gulab jamun, and if he just smells the gulab jamun and he says, "Wow, now I know what is a gulab jamun. It smells so nice. I have complete realization of gulab jamun." Now he has understood, but he is right about his understanding of gulab jamun, but it is not complete. He knows gulab jamun only by the smell. Another friend of you, he comes to the kitchen, he has not only smelled the gulab jamun, but he's also touched it, the soft texture. And as the gulab jamun melts as he touches it, he knows how soft it is. So he has smelled the gulab jamun and has also touched it. And he says, I have the complete understanding of gulab jamun. So he is also right. His understanding is better than the first person's understanding, but still it is not complete. The third friend of yours, he comes to the kitchen, he not only smells the aroma of the gulab jamun, he not only touches it, but he puts that sweet ball in his tongue and tastes it. So his experience of the gulab jamun is complete. But just like gulab jamun can be experienced at three different levels, absolute truth or God or reality, absolute reality can be experienced at three levels: Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. Brahman is compared to the person who's relishing the gulab jamun at the level of the fragrance. So when we see God in nature, when we see God in divinity, when we see God in wonderful activities of this world, in the 10th chapter of the Gita, text number 41 and 42, Krishna reveals to Arjuna that anything splendorous you see in this world, please know it is me. It is a fragment of my own power. So when you see, let us say, if you see some cricket batsman batting excellent and scoring a lot of centuries, you know that power is coming from Krishna. That Shakti is Krishna. In the 10th chapter, Krishna says, when you see something splendorous of the mountains and the Himalayas, so he takes one broad category and takes the best item in that category. And he says, the best item in that category is me. This is of all mountains, I am the Himalayas. Of all warriors, I am Arjuna. So, of course, these examples we may not be able to relate to because these examples are 5,000 years old. But if Krishna were to come today, he would give contemporary examples. He would say something like, of all smartphones, I'm Apple. or of all, of all businessmen, I'm, I don't know, Bill Gates. He'll take the best example within a broad category. Of all restaurants, I'm Govinda, something like that. So Krishna would do that. So this is a Brahman realization, understanding Krishna in his creation. Like, for example, when we see qualities in contemporary heroes, we can see Krishna there. Like, for example, recently Rajnikant, he's a superstar in Indian cinema. He was earlier known as Shivaji Rao Gaikwad. He was a bus conductor in Bengaluru, which is teeming with 13 million people. And he was an ordinary bus conductor, and he rose to superstardom. And people love him not simply for the way he bashes up the villains or the way he flips his cigarette or he, makes up his unruffled hair. No, he's actually very popular because of his unassuming nature and because of his God-fearing quality and because of the charity he gives and because of the low profile he keeps. And recently, when he was conferred with the highest Indian award for cinema, Dada Saheb Phalke Award, he immediately dedicated it to his bus driver colleague 45 years ago who had encouraged him to do acting. So this expression of gratitude is a divine quality, which when we see even in contemporary people, we can see it is coming from Krishna. And when we see that as divinity, when we see that as Krishna, then we are entering the Brahman space. Or when we see somebody like Abdul Kalam, who was the former president of India, when he was invited for convocation ceremony in Banaras Hindu University, as he entered the stage, he saw that there were 3 chairs kept for the vice chancellor, for the director of the university, and in the center for Abdul Kalam. And Abdul Kalam's chair was much bigger than the others. Naturally, because he was the president of India. So when he came there, naturally, instinctively, and spontaneously, he felt shy that he was being honored and given preferential treatment over his other 2 dignitaries there. So immediately refused to sit on that chair. And the organizers had to clumsily rush and get another chair of the same standard like the other 2 chairs. So this spontaneous act of humility and being convinced that others deserve as much respect as I, and I should not get a preferential treatment, is again a divine quality, which is natural humility. These are signs of evolved beings. So when we see these qualities in nature, like Mahendra Singh Dhoni, he is considered as India's one of the greatest cricket players, but is very well known for his off-the-field humility, for his willing to keep a low profile, for being very self-effacing. These are all divine qualities. Or when you see somebody like Virat Kohli saying in an interview that cricket is not the most important thing. Life is much bigger than cricket. Cricket will come and go. Now, these are very, very powerful statements from people who are very successful. So when we are able to see divinity in this world, then we are connecting to the Brahman aspect of reality, which is like smelling the aroma of the gulab jamun, which we discussed. But some people are more evolved. They connect to the Lord in their own heart, which is like understanding the Paramatma aspect, which is like touching the gulab jamun and getting a better understanding of the gulab jamun. Now, these are great sages who sit on the mountaintops and who hear the Lord's voice. They have access to paranormal phenomenon. They have access to mystical powers. And they connect with the Lord in their heart. Like if you read Journey Home, His Holiness Radhanath Swami writes how he heard a voice that told him, go to India. Now, you and I may not hear that voice all the time. So this is very evolved people who are connecting to spirituality at a much deeper internal level. So this is the second aspect, the Paramatma aspect. And the Bhagavan aspect, which is compared to tasting of the gulab jamun, is like understanding the cause of all causes as Krishna, who is now introduced in Bhagavatam. The entire Bhagavatam is dedicated to Lord Krishna, which we discussed in the first chapter also. So Krishna is that personality from whom, if somebody has experienced Krishna, just like if somebody has tasted gulab jamun, he has already experienced both touching of the gulab jamun and is also experienced the smelling of the gulab jamun. Similarly, once somebody has experienced Krishna, then that person has already experienced the Brahman aspect and the Paramatma aspect of the absolute truth. Therefore, Suta Goswami is telling us that engage all your duties, but don't forget to hear and chant Krishna's holy names. If we don't do that, we are wasting our time. And if we do that, then please know that as you spend more and more time in Krishna consciousness, we have to transform and we have to transcend our desires for sense gratification to desires for service and a desire to know about the absolute truth. And the absolute truth is revealed in this verse as having three features: Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. So having introduced us to Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan, now the question will arise in your mind, fine, okay, I want to connect to Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. I want to connect to the Supreme Lord. How do I do that? That is now going to be revealed in text number 12 of this chapter. So let us see what Suta Goswami has to say now. He is now going to tell us how to connect to the absolute truth. Tashraddadana munayo Jnana Vairagya Yuktaya Pashyantatmani Chatmanam Bhaktya Shruta Grihitaya.
The seriously inquisitive student or sage, well equipped with knowledge and detachment, realizes that absolute truth by rendering devotional service in terms of what he heard from the Vedanta Shruti.
Yes, it's Vedanta Shruti. So now how do we realize this absolute truth? Tashraddadana munayo jnana vairagya yuktaya pashyantatmani chatmanam bhaktya, devotional service, shruta grihitaya, by hearing. So hearing, which includes study of scriptures, hearing and study of scriptures is the best way to connect with absolute truth. So when we sit down to hear about the Lord, what we are actually doing is we're allowing higher intelligence to influence us. We're allowing divine wisdom to enter our hearts and reveal to us about the Lord. That's why Srila Prabhupada gave a lot of emphasis on morning classes in temple or hearing Bhagavatam from other speakers. Like I go for temple classes in the morning, we don't know what the speaker is going to speak. It's like today morning I went, Chaitanya Charan Prabhu gave a class. Yesterday somebody else gave a class. So we have a class here in the morning every day from 8 a.m. to 9:30. So when you sit in the class, we are sending a message to the universe that I want to hear divine wisdom. So the Srimad Bhagavatam is being narrated by a bona fide representative of Srimad Bhagavatam. And when we hear, the Lord in the heart recognizes our sincerity and starts revealing to us the divine wisdom. This is what is confirmed in the Gita also. 10th chapter, Krishna says that if we do this, Tesham Tatata Yuktanam Bhajatam Priti Purvakam Dadami Buddhi Yogam Tam Yena Mam Upayanti Te. Krishna says, if we do devotional service like this, Dadami Buddhi Yogam, I will give you the intelligence by which you can come to me. Krishna also says in the verse later that if we actually render this kind of devotional service where we hear about Krishna, where we chant Krishna's name, Krishna says just like darkness is removed when we switch on light, when the sun rises, darkness goes away. Similarly, when you get knowledge of scriptures, the torchlight of knowledge will remove the darkness of ignorance. Teshameva partam aham agyanajam tama nashayamatma bhavasto jnana deepena bhasvata. So when we hear Krishna Katha, it's like lighting the lamp of knowledge. Just like light removes darkness, all our doubts would disappear if we hear Bhagavatam. Because Bhagavatam will simply reawaken the Lord in our heart. So this is the process recommended. And this is how most spiritualists connect with the Lord. And this is the first process that Lord Chaitanya gave. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu. Shravanam is the first process of connecting with the Lord, hearing. When a child is born, the child hears from the mother about who is the father of the child. When the child goes to school, the child hears. Hearing is the medium, is the first basis of learning for the child. Similarly, in spiritual life, we are children. And our basis of growth in spiritual life is hearing. So this is the way the chapter is building up. After having answered the first two questions of the sages at Naimisharanya, Suta Goswami says that if you are engaged in household life, if you are a householder, please ensure that you are not living a wasteful life. And you can ensure that by having attachment to hearing or developing an attraction for hearing and chanting of Krishna's holy names. And to do that, he says one needs to engage all his occupational duties, not for simply earning money, but for inquiring about absolute truth. And one should channelize his desires not for sense gratification, but for knowing about Krishna. And who exactly is Krishna? What exactly is absolute truth? Suta Goswami says, we can know the absolute truth in three features: Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. Now, having said this, you may have a question: how do I connect with Krishna? How do I connect with these three aspects of the absolute truth? For that, Suta Goswami gives the solution. It's a process of hearing from people who have studied Krishna or who have experienced Krishna. So these are the verses that we have discussed today till text number 12. We'll stop here if there are any questions or comments. Hare Krishna. Next time we'll continue from text number 13. So thank you very much for your kind attention today. We'll again meet next week. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhupada.
Thank you.